Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining me today. I do truly appreciate it. And I am going to talk a little bit about a book that I finished reading recently, and that's called Freedom of the Mask. And that is a Matthew Corbett book from Robert McCammon. And it's the sixth book in Robert McCammon's Matthew Corbett series. And this is the copy that I read right here, Freedom of the Mask. It's the trade softcover version from Lividian Publications. And looking at the artwork, one of the things that I really dig about these Lividian Publications editions is as you read the story, I like to go back at the cover and say, okay, that's who that is. So it's kind of fun to, as you go, identify the characters, go back and be able to look at them. The artwork by Vincent Chong tends to be a montage or a collage on the covers, and it does make it fun to kind of go back and piece the stuff together. Not really spoilers, but it does tell you, it gives you an image of the characters, if you will. So it is a fun thing to do, going through, reading through these stories, taking a look at the pictures on the cover. I like it. It makes it a lot of fun. Anyway, I don't want to tell too much about the story, but Robert McCammon's work, I'm a big fan of Robert McCammon. He's got some legendary books like Swan Song, Boy's Life, books that people love. Even if they don't read Robert McCammon, they love those books. But I would say this series is his greatest work. The Matthew Corbett series, in my opinion, is his best writing, his best storytelling, and his best stuff. So it is a set of books set in the colonial era of the United States of America. Matthew Corbett's first book, Speaks the Nightbird, was 1699. And this book here is 1703. And it travels from North Carolina to New York to other places in that part of the country. And now it's gone to London. And the series, looking forward, reading the backs of the books, it goes on to Italy, and I don't know where else from there. But it's that era. And that era was one that I really wasn't that interested in reading about. I got nothing against it, don't typically read books from that era, but I've changed my mind and changed my tune. Robert McCammon has sold me, and I'm very interested. So I'm a little bit more open to future possibilities. So that's one of the other great things about this book and this series. Matthew Corbett is a young problem solver. He's in his early 20s. He started off as a clerk for a magistrate, a traveling magistrate in the colonies, who acted like a judge going from town to town, hearing serious trials. That magistrate ended up dying from illness. Matthew moved on to work for another magistrate in New York City, which was very, very small at that time, in 1700. And his talents, his knack for having to solve a problem, any sort of a puzzle or problem, he had to put it together, and he has a very good detective type mind, reminiscent of Sherlock Holmes, even as much as having a memory of being able to remember exact quotes from things that people said. And that kind of stuff. He ended up working for what was an early form of a detective agency out of London, which was now setting up camp in New York. So he went to work with a guy named Hudson Greathouse, a big, brash, like a Brum Bones sort of a character, powerful, tough, ladies' man, all that kind of stuff, very flamboyant. And at first, Greathouse didn't seem to care much for Matthew, but Matthew grew on him to where they're like brothers now, or like a son or a nephew. But they're a very close relationship. And Matthew's working for this detective agency as a problem solver. He's not being called a private investigator or a detective. He's called a problem solver. And so he quite literally gets paid to solve problems that people hire the company to get solved. And that's where we are in New York leading up to this point. This series has kind of taken a turn. When I reading through the first 4 books in the series, they all tend to be standalone. So up through the Providence Rider, they're more standalone. Of course, they build off of each other. The characters develop, and some come and some go and some return. But at the River of Souls, from there, on, and I'm more than halfway through Cardinal Black right now. But from here on, it seems as though it becomes a large story, with portions of the story maybe being completed. For example, you get to where you're finished in this place, and now they're going to another place to continue on the story. But it's a continual story, and I venture to guess it will go that way through the rest of the series into Leviathan, which comes out this December. But that's the way it seems. And it kind of reminds me of, I don't want to get into it, but the X-Files. For a while, I would watch the X-Files, and there were a lot of standalone episodes. And then as the series went on, they got more and more into a linear story going through. And that's the way a lot of the series, the television series are today, a linear story all the way through. So you just watch each episode to learn a little bit more along the way to the bigger story, the bigger arc. But anyway, Freedom of the Mask. I don't want to give away a lot of stuff from the last books in case you haven't read it. But when we finished on The River of Souls, I guess this is where we'll pause for a second. We'll pause. I'll tell you what I thought of the book, and then I'll talk a little bit about what happened before. So if you haven't read any of the previous books, go back and read the previous books. Read this series in order. Freedom of the Mask. I'm digging it. I'm digging it every step of the way. The Matthew Corbett character is one that I really love. Characters that have been introduced along the way. Not only new characters, but other characters that have been involved in previous stories. You get more of them, and you start to learn that maybe things aren't what we had thought exactly. So again, like the other books, I'm giving this 5 stars out of 5 stars. I really did like it. I've read, now I'm on my 3rd straight book, so I'm on a Matthew Corbett roll. I mean, I read The River of Souls with zero anything in between, Freedom of the Mask, and then directly into Cardinal Black. I want to get this series read. I'm excited to find out how the story goes. And now it's getting to a point where it's not like I can put the book down and then start the next chapter. I got to figure out how the story goes. So it's become a different animal for me, this Matthew Corbett series. But 5 stars out of 5 stars. I've liked every one I've read. So far I gotta feel like Queen of Bedlam is my favorite, or maybe Speaks the Nightbird. I don't know. Speaks the Nightbird is probably my favorite, but I like the way Matthew's character develops in Queen of Bedlam. But in this story arc now, we're getting this much more grand story, if you will. And this is a very good, entertaining, thick part of that story. So this book here from Lividian Publications, I'm trying to figure out the page count. Let's go back. The page count is 435 pages, 436, and it doesn't sound like much, but just take a look at that text size here for this one. It's small text, so it is heavy reading. And if you look at the limited editions, Speaks the Nightbird, Queen of Bedlam, Freedom of the Mask, they're thick books. They're good books. But I want to talk a little bit about the stories and how they go now. So if you haven't read River of Souls, maybe you shouldn't watch any further. I'll be kind of vague. But, spoiler alert, at the end of River of Souls, Matthew Corbett has lost his memory. He thinks he's somebody else. He's been living as the husband of a crazy lady in this village. And he runs into a Prussian Count Dahlgren from his past, who knows who he is, and who is on the outs with Professor Fell, and thinks he can use Matthew to get back in the good graces of Professor Fell, who's given Matthew his death card, a card with a bloody thumbprint on it. He wants Matthew bad. And he tells Matthew, hey, I can arrange for you to find out everything you need to find out. if you go with me to London to see Professor Fell. So the Prussian Dahlgren has killed Matthew's fiance that he thinks he's been married to for forever, his wife. Not really his wife, but he thinks she's his wife. He's killed her. Matthew is despondent. They go aboard this crappy ship, and the ship's about to break apart. The captain is drunk. And Matthew's hit on the head, and it all comes back to him. And he decides to kill the Count. He takes steps to kill the Count. And now he's considered a criminal. People aboard the ship report him, and he ends up going to prison. He goes to prison, and he's got friends. He's got friends now, Freedom of the Mask. He's got friends in London, although they're not truly friends. You'll find out who they are and how it goes and stuff like that. Meanwhile, Hudson Greathouse back at the ranch. Back at the ranch in New York, Hudson Greathouse wants to know where his buddy, his boy, his protege, Matthew Corbett is, his friend, and he's gonna find out. And he talks to Barry Grigsby, Matthew's on again, off again girlfriend, who truly does love Matthew, and Matthew truly does love her. He talks to her about it, and she insists on going with him to find out. So they end up going to Charlestown from New York, and they run into Magnus Muldoon, who kind of helps give some information, direct them in the right direction. Anyway, long story short, they find out what has happened to Matthew, that he's on a ship going to London, and they decide they're going too. So they raise up some funds, and they go to London also. And they're always one step behind Matthew. Everywhere Matthew goes, they're just one step behind. Things get pretty crazy, and Matthew Corbett is also put into prison as a murderer. And there's another character that comes into play. There's several characters that come into play, but there's another great character that comes into play, and it's a mystery who this is. And you can see some of these cool characters on the cover here. It's a mystery who it is. It's a mystery why people are behaving the way they're behaving in London. And I won't tell you anything else more about the story, but Matthew is in dire straits. He is in prison. Hudson Greathouse and Barry, they are captured, and they are being held captive. And things look very, very bad for our friends in Matthew Corbett land. And sometimes bad goes the worst. Sometimes it's out of the frying pan and into the fire. And I think that's the way this series has turned out at this point. And I'm, like I said, halfway through Cardinal Black, and it's out of the frying pan into the fire. Out of the fire and into the frying pan. It's out of one bad spot into another bad spot. And so many things seem to come together and play into another. And the way Robert McCammon writes these stories, he's got to be one of my favorite writers who ever lived, who I've ever read anyway. The way he spins the yarns, the way he tells the tale, the way he brings stuff back into the mix from long, long ago. You almost forgot it, and you're trying to think, okay, where was he at and where was she at and stuff like that, where'd they come from? You almost forgot it. You got to try to remember some of these characters, but a great job, and I can't wait to get to Leviathan, and I'm almost dreading it. That'll be the end. Leviathan will be the end. It'll be the last book. It's due out December of this year, 2024, and so great job. 5 stars out of 5 stars. I strongly suggest you read it, and if you haven't started the series, you got to go back to Speaks the Nightbird. Read it in order, or else you'll be lost, especially once you get to the River of Souls. You'll be lost if you pick up somewhere along the way and start reading. Anyway, I can think of no more lies to tell. I do truly appreciate it. Thank you for your time. C'est la vie, baby. Doo-doo.